Down the wall. Nice to meet you.
Bob.
Nice to see you.
Ryan Cole, down the hall.
Hi, Bob. How are you today?
Tim, nice to see you again, sir.
Hello, sir. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, sir. And nice to meet you, ma'am.
Sandra.
Thank you.
All right, let's begin. First off, I know Dean, our Dean mentioned it, but I would like to thank you all for being here again. I'm Ryan Moore. I'm accompanied by Nicole Livingston, Priscilla Rashavi, and Vandra Valdivia. And we're going to present our recommendation for the Ice Cold Express case study, as well as, or we're calling it the Intermodal Network Transition. So first off, let's address the challenges that they currently face in their network. Right now, they are all motor transportation company, and this kind of gives them, they're vulnerable to decreased driver capacity, so the driver shortages in the market, as well as their customers are actually requesting intermodal service. The second issue is that the products that they haul are refrigerated or temperature controlled and they're time sensitive, meaning they're basically perishable. The third challenge is actually the length of haul. So currently they operate in a longer haul market, which actually is a smaller market of the overall reefer market share. And this also leads to equipment constraints with repositioning as well. So our recommendation overall views 4 different kind of bins. We wanted to look at third-party logistics as an option, as well as the over-the-road network that they currently operate within. Also integrating rail into their network, and then the short-haul market penetration. So our strategic goals that we would like to accomplish or phase in is to look at the regional or regionalize their network. So by regionalizing their network, they're actually looking at sub-processes and processes currently in their network, while also looking at different regions by commodity and product type and trying to put together a good plan of action so that way they can attack the intermodal market. The next phase will be to modify trailers for TOFC, as it would be a quick and easy market entry strategy, as well as it would be a light in capital investment compared to the other options. Next, based on that, we would like to penetrate the short haul market, as it is the majority of the reefer market share. So what we're going to do is utilize the TOFCs, or utilize the modifications to the trailers and use that existing or that extra capacity in the short haul market. So we're also going to use that in looking at the last mile drayage portion, which is a crucial part of the intermodal transportation, as it is the last mile between the customer, or excuse me, the rail and the customer. After looking at all those, we would like to start bidding on high volume intermodal lanes. These lanes would be basically an accumulation of all the different things that we've started, and we will use that knowledge that we've gained throughout those different strategic goals to gain more market share. As well, we think the long-term goal would be to enter into the COFC kind of market with the containers. We believe that utilizing all those aspects will lead to greater market share. It'll increase profitability, as well as increasing our customer service.
All right, and one of the important considerations that must be taken into account is, of course, the capacity of the equipment. We looked at various different types, such as drayage and over-the-road tractors, as well as highway tractors, trailer TOFC, with the, as well as the chassis and container combination. So given with the assumption of a total overweight of 80,000 pounds, we see that the highest capacity is with the use of the highway trailer and the drayage tractor. In contrast, the least capacity is through the over-the-road tractor and the chassis container combination. Now, when you look at the cubic weight, trailer has only a marginal increase in capacity, with about 1,500 more cubic square feet than the container. And now, ice hauls oranges from Florida seafood from the East Coast, cheese products from the Upper Midwest, meat from the Heartland, and produce from the West Coast. So by regionalizing each of these, by regionalizing the network per commodity, it's going to enable them to have a better understanding of the customer and shipper's needs throughout the regions. Drivers would then also be able to specialize in specific lanes, and we would be able to increase the customer service levels because we're going to have knowledge of what each customer would like.
So as a short-term solution, we propose that ICE should enter the intermodal market via TOFC by modifying their existing trailers. By doing so, they'd be able to gain market knowledge in the intermodal industry and also reduce environmental impacts of using OTR. In a recent case study written by the Association of the American Railroad, they stated that by using rail versus trucks, you're actually able to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 75%. Now, by getting into the intermodal market, we'll actually be able to service our contracted customers we would be able to offer them intermodal services and provide them with their contracted load quantities. Modifications that would have to be done to the trailers would be installing lift pads, adding lift point decals, and also installing top rail protectors.
Currently, ICE is only hauling goods that are 300 miles or more from the shipper. Now, however, with the utilization of the intermodal railroad, we will then be able to, we will have extra capacity to be able to penetrate further into the short haul OTR and drayage markets. Now, if you look at the total percentages, the current percentage that they have of the market is potentially 36.2% given the amount of miles that they go. With the increased capacity, given the extended intermodal lanes, we will then be able to penetrate potentially the additional 64% of the market that is available. Now, if you look at the individual additional market per commodity, there's about 60 to 75% of those commodities are all done through drayage or short haul OTR. And now one of the things that would allow, because we're going to be using these intermodal capabilities, we're going to be able to keep our drivers closer to home. Now, as we all know, we're experiencing a driver shortage, and according to Business Insider, it is expected by 2022 to be at the point of almost 2,400,000 shortage. Now, drivers don't really want to enter into over the road like they used to. While there is great money in it, they want to have a home life balance that I think we all kind of want at the end of the day. So by being able to offer them competitive rates, which we're going to be paying them, and still offering them that home life balance that we all would like, we could entice drivers to actually be able to come to work for ICE.
So one of the more important issues that we have to deal with within entering the intermodal market would be to basically look at the last mile of the drayage or the last mile of the move. So we want to give, or ICE wants to give their customers an overall door-to-door solution. So we're going to talk about some 3PL solutions in a second, but we would like to use the last mile drayage as a way to gain operational control in certain areas that we find profitable, as well as this allows for expansion into other types of loads as well as other types of drayage. So port terminals or terminal operations within the marine industry, as well as continually moving to diversify their overall freight types, so they could end up contracting and receiving contracted loads from other carriers, such as the rail. Then we also, so what this, by doing this, we actually would try and transition into using dray tractors. You're going to get actual overall more weight capacity or weight per load using a dray tractor than you would if you would use a over-the-road tractor. I believe it was roughly about 4,500 pounds additional weight that you would receive. So also looking at the third-party logistics piece. So currently, or at least in the case study, they didn't discuss this as much, but we believe that it was an important aspect that they would have to utilize to become more, or reduce their empty miles as well as their backhauls. Doing this is going to allow them to actually extend their operational control by utilizing carriers in markets that they don't have. So, for example, if they don't have carriers in Seattle, but they're doing an intermodal move, they can contract that load out to a dray company in that area to basically finish the last mile of the dray.
So one of the goals we have for ICE is for them to bid on high volume lanes. We believe this will be good as they will be able to enter the intermodal market, which will allow them to better service not only their existing customers, but also be able to service those potential customers that they have. Some of the things we think that ICE needs to look at when looking at these high volume lanes are the length of the haul, the product types, and the intermodal capability. We believe that with them entering this market, they will be able to have capital gains, which will allow them to slowly transition from their TOFC to a COFC container company. We want them to invest in COFC in the long run, because one of the rail is slowly transitioning away from TOFC and into the COFC market. This is an advantage for ICE, as they will be able to double stack their containers, which ultimately leads them to a savings of about 18%. One of the benefits of COFC is that it allows for better tracking, and this is important when you have a reefer container. Also, we do find one challenge with having a COFC network, and it is the fact that ICE does not own many chassis. We believe that the solution to this would be to have them do a neutral chassis pool. So we believe that the COFC transition is the last transition that ICE has to, or the last goal we want them to meet, so that they can enter that intermodal market and they can continue to grow their capital gains.
So displayed here is our spot load network example for our intermodal solution for ICE. We looked at a cost difference for mode of transportation versus commodity of lettuce, candy, and meat. As you can see, for lettuce and meat, we decided to use an intermodal COFC when we looked at the fuel cost of about $1.75. For us it showed that for lettuce and meat, there was a cost savings of about $2,200 for lettuce and $1,300 for meat. Now, at the fuel cost at $1.75, we decided that for candy we would use OTR due to the faster time in transit being more, or outweighing the cost savings in this example. Now, when fuel costs increased to $3.50, we decided to still utilize the intermodal COFC for lettuce and meat, because as you can see, it actually increased their cost savings. And for candy, we went from OTR to COFC because there was an increase of about 3 times of what it was at a fuel charge of $1.75.
So, basically to wrap it up, we believe in the short-term and long-term solutions that we've laid out, that this is actually going, or the recommendations that we've made, is going to be able to allow ICE to enter into that intermodal market and be successful. So, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Let's go to Tom.
Do you know what the break point is for fuel between over the road and the container move for the candy?
No, but we will find that out for you.
So, for two of the commodities you were looking to run COFC on the rail, just so we would understand, what components did you use along with the COFC, as opposed to an over the road with the trucks moving and TOFC? What were the different components?
So basically what we looked at is obviously both ends. So we took the drayage at one end, the drayage at the other end, combined it with the kind of the net miles. We added in our fuel surcharges at different levels. Transit time, we looked at overall, but it wasn't as big of a factor as we believe, for example, lettuce and meat. The lettuce was a low cost commodity, so we felt that the transit time, even though it actually perishes faster than the other two commodities, we felt that the cost savings were too substantial to neglect over the course of, if it was for volume, for example.
You mentioned neutral chassis pool. Were you planning to use a neutral chassis pool on the destination end?
Yes, so, obviously, we chose the network or the neutral because it would allow us to have the chassis where we need them, and since we don't own them at this point, and that's ultimately why we chose.
And to extend on that, the biggest issue was we really didn't know exactly where their operations were. So in reality, the whole, I guess, concept of the neutral chassis pool was that if we needed it in certain regions, we would utilize that.
Did you include the chassis cost in your example?
So for the chassis costs, I don't believe we actually added it into the transit time for that, so that would have been something that we should have probably added.
Most of your product is perishable product here. Did you have any conversation around risk management?
Yes.
Well, one of the things that we had considered, especially with the community, was that even though we were considering doing the COFC when the gas hit $3.50 a gallon, that during the summer months, that even though it is an additional, we would save $90, that it actually would be worth it to spend the extra money per load to have the control of that product within the hands as it's being transported. We also did discuss different monitoring solutions because as we know that reefers can go down at any time. And so having a monitoring portion of that is very critical into the supply chain.
And going off of that, we did do a little research on the monitoring, and we actually found that currently, so IDS uses a monitoring system on their COFC containers, and it allows them to have the ability to remotely change temperatures on their reefers and do the internal temperature monitoring, which we believe ultimately should be what ICE should also do, as it would give them that capability, especially for products that need it.
Did you figure the cost for this as well?
A question on the, you talked about using third-party, was that against just like a dredge operator from a transportation perspective, not a warehouse, cold storage, or anything like that?
So it would have been for more of a transportation perspective, for helping assist in the last mile drays, as well as hopefully we probably want to diversify like the load amounts or the load types by utilizing it and growing as a network.
So I was a little confused there. You weren't talking about using a brokerage agreement to have some other asset of another carrier haul your freight. You were just doing it for the drayage costs of both ends.
So no, it would have been for the asset, so to use a power, for example, to have the power
not
to,
the trailer.
not the trailer, no, we'd be utilizing our own equipment. So we would probably have an interchange or some kind of liability in place with our carriers to make sure we can mitigate risk for that situation.
One of the points that was made was that there's about an 18% savings when you go to containers. How did you come up with that savings?
That was actually given to us within the case study.
You're talking about cost savings.
Yes.
The carbon footprint reduction you got from
From the American,
from
the
research.
Association of
From
American
research.
Railroad.
The recommendation calls for the initial conversion of existing trailers to intermodal. What impact will the shrinking intermodal TOFC footprint have on that strategy, and what time frame do you think you might need for conversion to COFC?
We had decided that within a year, so for the short term, we take into account that for TOFC would be about a year. And then after that, we would be looking into getting into COFC. Just because, as she has stated, TOFC really is, or they're really trying to convert to COFC, so we took that into account. That's how we came up with our
So
strategy.
the time frame is about a year.
About a year. Yes, for TOFC.
But during that transition time, going from a truckload carrier to a TOFC going into a new market? Did you discuss process and procedures and how you're, I know you talked about tracking, but what you would have at ICE to track your equipment and as a PLC versus the container, the effort to go around tracking their equipment?
Well, we looked at, obviously most trucking companies actually have like GPS on their tractors and trailers, so that way they can track that kind of, those kind of moves. So we did discuss it. It wasn't our initial driving force behind it because we really wanted to move towards COFC and that be our kind of our crutch. We obviously want to still operate the long haul market because that's what we do already, so you might as well just continually improve on it. But for the monitoring portion, I would probably suggest to use GPS for those TOFC containers or trailers.
How did you cost justify the TOFC conversion, and that you were only going to be looking at that as a product line for about a year?
Well, we knew that rather than purchasing TOFC and doing upgrades to some of our the equipment that we already have, that it was going to be able to kind of allow them to get their feet wet and to have getting the experience without having a huge cost being sunk into it.
Because we had decided that we weren't going to completely utilize all of our trailers to transition to TOFC. We were just going to utilize a portion of that and see how we did in the market, and then kind of like a cyclical transition into TOFC and the same process again for COFC.
Do you have any specific numbers you were working with in terms of the fleet size, either in sort of your phase 1 or your phase 2?
We actually didn't have total volumes of what we would need, so we didn't feel as if we'd be able to give you guys a relative good number for that.
I'm curious about one thing. There's a lot of people in our industry that don't understand this slide that you put together.
Yes.
When converting a highway trailer to an intermodal trailer. How did you find that out?
I actually went and looked on the Association of American Railroad. They had a case study that they had basically given recommendations and modifications for these trailers to transition to TOFC. And they basically said that they had a lot of specifications as far as like air hook plates and these specific examples. So we thought that that would definitely be something that since you have to actually lift the trailer, it's beneficial to, now that it's transitioned to TOFC, it's beneficial to utilize those modifications.
What was the logic behind trying to penetrate the short haul market versus right now, I understand, are they not the king of the long haul market today?
Well, they do have a good portion of the long haul market. However, because we're going to be sending more over intermodal, we're going to have more capabilities to be able to do it. Now, as I said, with each commodity, it's between 60 to 75% of each commodity is done between 0 and 300 miles from shipper to customer. That's a huge percent of the market. And so also with drivers wanting to be home on a regular basis, you're kind of combining, this is where it's coming from, and these are where the drivers want to go.
Just as a thought for future, see, because the dollar figure, when you went through that, just for future thought, when you're switching over from trucking to rail, for the liability portion of it, because the railroad has a certain limit on their liability, and depending on what your commodities are. Did you have a chance to discuss that? Because I know that wasn't it wasn't here. Did that ever come up in your discussion?
Not that I know of.
Okay, just curious, because that is a big deal. Because if you've only got $80 or $100 a load, just the two things that I addressed earlier, your chassis charges and those things, those would also be added too. So then it all of a sudden becomes a flat line. So then why would you modify your equipment? So there's a lot of questions, further questions that weren't addressed. I just wanted to throw that at you as well.
Absolutely, and of course, with given more time, we would love to be able to delve in more into more of those questions.
Any more?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
It was nice to meet you.
I'll learn the two too. I was